that's like I said, I know I kind of am getting off topic talking about research, but yeah, that's sort of about me. Extracurriculars outside of derm, cooking, working out. I played football in high school, but that was a short term thing. Pretty typical stuff. And I think it's good that you guys start preparing all that now because that really comes up a lot in interviews is about you as opposed to like, they don't really ask you boring questions. It's a lot of fun stuff. And they're always going to ask you, tell me your activities. And usually that's going to branch off into them just, shooting the shit with you. And it turns into a more fun interview. But yeah, sorry. Sorry if that, I think I wrapped it up there. I don't know. I go on a lot of tangents. So stop me whenever if I start talking about 10 different things you're going to ask me.
No, that's great. I love that. I go on tangents too. So more people are obviously coming in. Mayhack, I DM'd you the attendance form. If you could just recirculate that for everyone coming in, everyone fill out the attendance form. I was also wondering, Chris, when did you discover that you were interested in dermatology and what sparked that interest?
Sure. So I was interested from it in it as an early age, around 9 or 10 years old. I started getting like palmar hyperhidrosis or sweaty palms, and I was very aware of how it affected me day to day, writing an exam and getting the paper a little bit wet, holding hands with a girl, playing tag with my buddies. It was like it's such a small thing, but you realize like the impact it can have just being annoying. And so I started researching stuff online about it from a young age and seeing a dermatologist, which was the first time I actually started going to a derm regularly. And that was kind of an early path into derm for me. I just found it interesting to read up about my own condition and be like, hey, like, what can I do for this? Even though I didn't understand half of what I was reading. And that's kind of like the first half of my personal statement of where that early exposure came from. Because at that point, I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was young. And that was the first specialty that I kind of ended up choosing. And it bounced around a lot to like second and third favorites after that, all throughout like my early years before high school. But derm was always the main one that I liked the most. And then when I got a little bit older, around 14, my mom, seeing how much I was interested in derm and always talking about it and having, fun seeing my dermatologist, was like, yeah, your grandfather passed away in the 90s before I ever met him. She was like, he actually passed away from a melanoma that he never got treated, metastasized to his brain after like 9 or 10 years, and he ended up dying at 63. So that kind of was another aspect for me. And again, the other half of my personal statement, where it brought into this like, I use that kind of in my personal statement as what I would see myself doing as a dermatologist with like a heavier focus on general derm and skin exams, because those things are kind of, they happen every day, but they're starting to kind of fall to the wayside a bit versus, cosmetic derm or people specializing in just Mohs. And you're getting like a decrease in the amount of skin checks at a typical office when you look at patient appointments. And so I really harped on how important that was to me with my own personal history and my family as something that I would love to do and like how I see myself practicing when I own my practice one day. So my exposure was early. I know Johnny and Grace, the other two derm matches, they both didn't fall in love with it until medical school. So it's not like you need early exposure. It's not like, oh no, I just found out I like it second year. How's it going to come across in interviews? I would say I actually stood out in the sense that on all my aways, I don't think anybody was ever into it before high school, and definitely nobody ever said they were into it at like the age of 9 or 10. I was always the only one who was like, "Oh yeah, I've liked it forever."
Wow, that's great. Thank you. That's really inspiring. I wanted
Yeah,
to tell everyone that's might have come later that this is an open question and answer session. So everyone feel free to ask questions. I'll start the ball rolling in case anybody like needs to think of something. I wanted to ask you, what was your experience? Because I'm a second year and we're about to go on rotations. Um, what did you see about dermatology rotations that was specific, that was different than the other rotations that you've been on, and why did you like that?
yeah. So I will say it's to me, and probably to all you guys. Once you do one, you'll be like, "This is the best rotation I've ever done." It's very different, of course, than inpatient because you're on an outpatient basis at virtually every residency or every place you'll do an away at, barring like there's a couple places that you might fall on like an on a rotation week where they're doing an inpatient consult. but that really just means you're going to sit at a desk for 10 hours and maybe see one patient every other day. So it's pretty much just like free time to chat and get to know the residents. So on the outpatient basis, yeah, I mean, working in a derm office is awesome because everything you're seeing, you genuinely enjoy. So there's never really a moment of boredom, even when you're seeing 80 patients just kind of hanging out behind the doctor. Depending on how involved they want you to be, you're still having a good time because you're like making mental notes of, oh, I'll remember this for next time, or let me go look up that when I get out of the room. And so just from that, naturally, the day flew by because I was so involved in what was going on. It wasn't like my, ICU rotation where I was like, what the hell's even happening? Like we're dealing with a patient that has 40 things and I don't even know the first thing to start with here. And I just kind of would zone out because it'd be like, how am I ever going to know this patient? Like tomorrow it's going to be someone different. So it doesn't even really matter. It felt like you had more, it just felt like you were having, even though you're not having any impact, I was having more of an impact, at least for my future, like learning things as I go. Um, so that was my favorite part of all my derm rotations. And I think that environment too, if you don't love being in a hospital, which I know a lot of people tend to not like it, being outpatient, I mean, you show up there, everyone's happy, everyone's in a good mood. They can't wait to get started seeing patients. Even when you're moving quick, it's still much more controlled and more fun, at least to me, than inpatient. You feel, you feel not as, how can I say, you feel like you have a better grasp of what's happening because you're seeing so many of the same things. Let's say you see 10 patients, one or two of them might be a new thing. A lot of it's acne, psoriasis, atopic dermatitis. So just because of that, you don't never feel completely lost. Except for like when the derm you're with will be like, I don't even know what's going on here. And then you kind of feel good because you're like, hey, it's good to see that even like an expert in the field, there's so many things going on that it's okay to be like, I don't know, and have to really kind of think about it. So I like that part of it, how, you're not dealing with somebody who's about to, die in front of you or has some major thing. You don't have like that pressure. Of course, you want to do great, but not having that pressure on you all the time, I think, is another nice aspect. And then, you actually get a lunch break. So that's good. Every way you go on, they're going to feed you so much free food. I mean, they have like pharmacology people in there, or not pharmacology, whatever they call it, like the farm industry. They're in there for presentations almost every single day. So whether it's free Starbucks in the morning or, a full free catered lunch at the afternoon, that's another nice benefit. And these are just things like you don't get inpatient. So it really makes it that much better.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions from the audience?
I have one. How did you pick which audition rotations you want to do? And can you just talk a bit more about that process?
Yeah. So because my dates are a little wonky. I feel like I've done so much paperwork between like fourth year applying, third year getting a ways. So I want to make sure I get the dates correct. It was about December of my third year, where that was considered early by a month or two. So I would say don't start, any earlier than that, maybe November, but it's not really going to help. But definitely try to start December emailing programs. So I didn't really care where I did in a way. I just knew I wanted a lot because there's only so many DO selective programs. And anywhere you get in a way, sort of, it doesn't always happen, and it didn't always happen for me, but sort of, it's supposed to be a guaranteed interview. Like unless they just have so many candidates that are so amazing, then you might do great and still fall through the cracks and not get one. But you can go into it saying at least this, I'll be guaranteed interviews. So just assume that 8 away rotations, you'll get 8 interviews. Is like a good way to look at it. So I just knew I wanted a lot. I wanted to fill my schedule. I personally didn't care about where. So I reached out everywhere. I probably sent emails to 60 or 70 programs. Like half of them only take MDs. And I was like, I mean, it can't hurt just to shoot one in case the DO ones don't pan out. But it's a very slow process. So you're not, unless you get really lucky, you're not going to be able to be like, hey, I'd really like to do 3 different Florida ones back to back to back. So I don't have to travel there 3 separate times. It's probably not going to line up like that. You might get 2 of them, but I know I had to fly to Florida 3 times. I had to fly to Michigan twice. It was like I had to go across the country, then back, then across the country again, because I wasn't able to get the dates lined up where I could be like, okay, cool, I'll go to New Jersey, then from New Jersey, I'll go to Michigan, then Michigan, I'll go to Florida and do 3 in a row. So that, as far as scheduling, that part can be a little tough. But yeah, just start cold emailing December of your third year. So I think, I don't remember my exact email message, but it was something along the lines of like, hey, you Google the program and you'll find not the program director's email because that's like hidden. It's really hard to get those, but you'll get the program coordinator and you'll be like, hey, so and so, I'm a third year at NYTCOM. I'm really interested in dermatology. And then, you can put a little bit like a sentence or two about yourself. I think I kind of just left it at like, hey, this is me. I'm interested in derm. I've heard great things about your program. I'm thinking of ranking they're one of my like highly. I got to think how you word it because you don't want to say ranking them when you're only a third year. But you could be like, they're one of my like highly regarded spots that I would love to go to as a residency. However, I'm terrible with words on the spot. So however you can make that sound nice, just kind of say that to them and be like, if you could get back to me about any away rotations, I would love to schedule one. And then usually they'll get back to you and they'll be like, hey, great, we just started scheduling, or no, we haven't. And they'll give you a date to follow up again in like a month. And then once the ball gets rolling with that, once you like get it, they'll send you dates and then they'll start asking for a bunch of paperwork. So that's like the typical process. I probably emailed between December through March. March was probably the latest I booked one. I think I booked most of them in between that period. But I've heard of students book them even as late as May. Like they were like, oh yeah, I kept emailing spots and something opened up and they were able to squeeze me in. That never happened for me, but if you ever find that you're like lacking one or two versus how many you want, it doesn't hurt to shoot another email in May and see if anybody might have dropped it due to like a scheduling conflict.
Thank you. And so just to piggyback off of that, you were saying there's a difference between the MD and DO rotations. Can you talk a bit about that if you had experience with the MD ones?
So I didn't do an MD only one. The benefit of doing an MD only one would just be that they're a month long. And if you're looking to get a letter from an away rotation, nobody's going to write you one, unfortunately, for like less than 3 weeks. And let's even say you got a 2-week DO one and you were like, oh, maybe they'll write me one. When you go to that rotation, you're going to see in derm, you almost never work with the same clinician every day because since they're not inpatient, they have 10, 12, 14 different clinics under their like residency program. So that's why it's good to have a rental car, and that's why it can get a bit expensive. I know I spent for my 8 away rotations that weren't in New York where I had my car, I spent $11,200 for the year of extra loans. Could you live a little bit cheaper? For sure. I talked to students who were like, oh yeah, I drove across the country to save money. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, my flights for the most part were like $300 was the most expensive. So how much money are you going to save driving across the country? I think it's going to be equal, but it is going to cost a little bit. Sorry, again, like I said, I'm getting on tangents. To answer your question, the MD one's good because you can get a letter. Because if you're there for 4 weeks, you're probably going to work with the same preceptor. At least that's what I've heard from the 2 people I know as DOs that did an MD one. They weren't mixed up every day. They got like a lot of time, or they asked and they were like, hey, I'm trying to get a letter out of this. Could I be with the PD for like a good portion of the 4-week rotation? So with those, you'll get a strong letter from somebody that's probably known in the field, but you're obviously sacrificing 4 weeks where you could have done 4 1-week DO rotations that are going to give you interviews because the MD place that's never taken a DO in the history of their program isn't going to take a DO. So it's like you're really just there for the letter. The DO ones on the flip side, those, I mean, I think I kind of covered all the benefits before of just, you're going to be able to give FaceTime, show them that, you're hardworking, show them your personality, and they'll give you an interview and hopefully you end up matching there. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll even say, because it'll probably come up. So for letters, I had none from any residency program. I did 2 separate 2-week private practice rotations in my 4th year, one back in Boston. So I went home for 2 weeks and the other one on Long Island. And I had both of them because you're with the same derm because you're at their own private clinic. I had both of them write my letters. And I think that's how most people do it. The only DOs that really are going to get a letter who don't do an MD 4-week rotation and don't do private practice, it's because they've known somebody for like 3 or 4 years doing research. So that's the other option. And that is stronger if you can get that, but that's hard to get. I didn't have that. The other 2 students, I believe, who both matched derm, Johnny and Grace, I don't think they had that. I don't want to speak for them. I could be wrong, but I don't think they had anyone write them a letter who knew them for years.
Thank you.
Since we're kind of talking about like MDDO already, I wanted to ask you, how did you feel your experience was like applying from an osteopathic school? Like, how did you feel like it affected you? And because we are coming from an osteopathic school, what are some things that you feel like you would recommend we incorporate over the years to show our interest in derm?
Yeah. So before I answer the second part, as far as like a DO versus an MD, I do want to say that of course they have way more spots than we have to match into, but there's been times during this process where I'm like, I'm happy that I am a DO matching into this and not an MD, because even though you have so many more programs open to you and you don't have that bias held against you, I mean, the amount of MDs that I've heard with just stellar applications. So I lived with a kid for 2 weeks when I was moving between places between third and fourth year, and he went to NYU. He had 21 first author publications by himself. I don't know his board scores. I don't know if he honored anything, but it's like NYU. That's a top 3 university in the world for medicine. So that alone, that's big to have. He had 15 interviews to MD programs, didn't match anywhere. He soaked into an EM position at LIJ on Long Island. So when I hear stuff like that, it happens to DOs too, but it really feels like MDs, there's even more competition and having a connection matters even more. And I spoke on the phone to the PD of Brown Dermatology at one point, their residency program, just because he had, my mom's business had done some work with him, and she was like, "Hey, my son's applying derm. You talk to him." And he was like, he didn't know I was a DO, so he straight up was like, "Yeah, as an MD, if you don't have somebody who you've known for 2 or 3 years who's going to call me or call a program and battle for you to get accepted, realistically, you're just not going to get into a residency program." And then I was like, "Well, I'm a DO anyway, so I don't know how much it matters." And he was like, "Oh, well, it still matters a lot, but you might, in that case, more people get in without that person battling for them." So when comparing the two, there are times where I think you guys will see yourself. You'll be like, "Yeah, it would be nice to be an MD, but I would have probably had a terrible 3 years, 4 years of medical school, just the amount of work. You wouldn't have any free time. You'd have to be involved in something every second of the day just to stand out. At least that's how it sounds. But of course, that's like kind of a generalization. For the part you were asking about DOs and what you can kind of do to stand out, I think it's good since we don't have a home program at our school, like a home derm program. I think it's good to try to show early exposure by reaching out and getting involved in papers early on. Um, you know, Even if you don't do until your second year, it's still better to have it than not. But the earlier you do them, no one's ever confirmed this for me, but I just feel like they kind of look at that stuff and they're like, "Oh, hey, this person had a paper that was published 3 years ago, so that means they were into it early," versus somebody that might have a lot of publications starting a year ago. Do I know that that really matters? No, but that just seems like something that everybody's such a good applicant that when you're looking for a reason to take someone over another, that might be something you look into too. Um, but so let's see, research. If you don't get research or alongside research, another thing would be like just contacting local derms and shadowing at their office, and that way they get to know you for the long term. That might help too. See, these are hard for me to say because I didn't do them, but that something like that could help, I guess, get a stronger letter. Like if you, as a first year, started shadowing with the dermatologist and then you did an official private practice rotation as a fourth year, then their letter might be really good. They might be more willing to call up for you, even if they're not a big name in the field. They probably, I would just assume they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've known this person 3 years now. Sure, I love this guy or girl. Let me go ahead and try to help him, get in, do whatever I can do." And then yeah, I mean, being in the derm interest, being in this club and being in other, derm related clubs or extracurriculars you can do, like there's the I forget the name of it. There was one like donating, like there's the donating sunscreen, things like that. Being able to put that stuff on your resume, I think it helps, but worst case, it doesn't hurt. It's just another sign that you're giving your free time to do stuff related to the field of dermatology.
Thank you. I'll ask the
Mhm.
audience if they have any questions.
Yeah, please feel free to ask anything. I'm an open book, so any questions you guys have.
Do you personally see yourself focusing more on Mohs or aesthetic derm? And did you decide on your rotations based on that, like whichever program focuses more on what?
Sure. So I will say I went into fourth year being like, Mohs, I don't care about it. I don't know why everybody is battling about how they want to do it so bad. It sounds dumb to me. I have no care to do it. Then I saw it and I was like, all right, that's actually really cool. Maybe that's something as I go through residency, I'll start to like. But because of my personal statement with my grandfather, my big thing is I would like to still just do general dermatology. And of course, you need to do cosmetics. Once you work with some dermatologists in a private practice setting and talk to them, they'll, they talk, they'll tell you anything. So every single derm I worked with was like, yeah, you got to do cosmetics. Even if like, you can say you'll do general derm to look good in an interview, because you never want to mention in an interview. I've been told this by 2 or 3 different people, so just assume it's true. You never want to say, oh, I really want to do cosmetics. Apparently that's a red flag. I've heard that a couple different times. So never say cosmetics. That's what I see myself doing. Just the money stuff. None of the, no insurance, none of that hassle. But you are going to do cosmetics to keep your practice afloat, is what I've heard from a few different derms. It's like you need to be getting that money with how bad insurance is paying people back in every field of medicine now, and even dentistry. You need to be doing cosmetics to keep the place open. I mean, that's a big portion of what your money is going to be. But yeah, so for myself, I call it just general derm. I might decide like, hey, I want to be an expert in psoriasis or an expert in BCCs and SCCs, and then kind of subspecialize in that. But for sure, right now it's just general dermatology. And I don't think I'll switch to Mohs, but I want to keep an open mind because it is cool. It's just, it blows my brain when you see what they do, like cutting the skin and then they mark it with all these colors and they're able to like identify on the dermatopathology slides what's going on in 2 seconds. I guess I'll learn it one day, but I don't see myself. I don't know if I could do that day in and day out. That takes a brain that can like really understand what they're looking at, I feel like.
Thank you. And we do have a question in the chat asking,
Oh yeah, sure.
was there a separate residency application for applying for dermatology? If there was, can you speak about it? Thanks.
A separate residency application for applying derm. No, it's just the emails you're going to send to try to get away rotations as a third year, but there's no official application. And then you'll do your application through ERAS. So it's not like urology or I think ophthalmology where they have their own match process outside of ERAS. Everything's going to go through that. So you'll go in there and they'll cover all this for you. I've like blacked it out. I can barely remember it, but you'll go in there, you'll choose dermatology as a specialty, and you'll see all the programs and you'll click apply. And all your documents will be uploaded to ERAS, so it'll send out to every place on its own. I don't think anywhere that I applied had a secondary application. That might be an MD only thing, because I think I've heard of a few programs like sending you a separate list of like 2 or 3 essays and being like, hey, write us about these. But I never did that. I don't know anyone that ever did that as far as DOs. So no, just the one normal application.
Thank you for that. I wanted to know, when choosing a program, what are some things that you recommend that we look for and some questions that we can ask during a derm rotation or perhaps during an interview?
So big things to look for, I think first and foremost is your fit. Like, how did you feel about the environment? And it is dermatology, so it's really hard for the environment to be like toxic. It never was for me because, again, everyone's in such a good mood, especially the attendings and the residents because of the hours and the lifestyle. But yeah, if you're ever in a toxic environment, I would say then it really stands out because in derm, that's like crazy for that to even be imaginable. Other things to look out for is like if you think you want to do Mohs or, pediatric derm as a fellowship, how are they matching people into Mohs and pediatric derm? Like, are they matching 1 or 2 every year? Or have they not matched one in like 3 or 4 years? Because that matters. But even that, it's hard to really judge because it's like, well, did anybody even apply to it in the last 3 or 4 years? Because the classes are so small. You're talking like 1 to 4 residents in the typical DO class per year. So to not see Mohs matched for 1 or 2 years could just be nobody wanted to apply for it. Other things to look out for. So, I mean, this kind of goes with fit, but I think the PD, because you're going to be very close with them, you want to make sure you like them. Again, everyone's super nice. There have been PDs that were like a little bit sharper, but that doesn't really mean anything because like that's me just nitpicking, like saying they were still really nice, but they had like maybe a little bit of a sharper tone or like slightly impatient. But that's, once you guys have done your surgery and OB rotations, it's like as good as it is in those fields, doesn't even match up to like the worst dermatologists. So it's hard to really complain about that. Trying to think if there's anything I'm missing because like I know there was a meeting last week with MatchPal, and that one Johnny and Grace were in, and one of them gave a great answer to this question of what do you look out for, and I was like, thank God they spoke up because like I just want to get into derm, so I was like, I didn't even have an answer, so that's why I'm thinking. Location, right? Again, it's derm. I would go to Alaska to do dermatology, so location I didn't really care about, but I guess once you get interviews, that might be a way you stratify it is locations. But I wouldn't worry about that stuff when you're like, oh, where should I shoot an email to do an away rotation? Like that, you need to ignore everything and just email everywhere and just get as many as you can. But location, and then the only other big thing I could think of would be salary, which again, this would be like after you've interviewed and you're making your your rank list. But salary can be like a little bit of an issue. I know the program I matched at, I put them third on my rank list, and the only reason they weren't number one was because of salary, and that was because they're right above Miami. So rent for a 1-bedroom apartment by yourself is like $3,000 on average, and they pay $51,000 a year. So it doesn't, the math doesn't add up. It's like you can't afford to live there really on their salary. So if that matters to you, but I'm just kind of telling myself the money's gonna, 4 years I'll be making good money. So if I got to take out $15,000 a year of like personal loans or get money from my parents if they have it, I'll just do that because, at this point, what's another $50,000 of loans when, I'm walking out with 400,000? It's like, all right, in the long run, it's not the biggest deal to me. I'm sorry, you asked, there was a second part of that question, right? It was what to look out for. And then it was what to look out for when you're doing the aways, but there was a second part too, or am I wrong?
It was you kind of covered it. It was kind of like what questions can you ask like during the interview?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so again, this is really going to be like by the time you interview, you're going to know everything about the program because of how many times they'll go through it at your away rotation in the early part of your interview before you start them. They're going to cover a lot of the stuff, but for the sake of just like asking questions, yeah, you can ask stuff like, what's your board pass percentage, which is basically 100% everywhere. What is your fellowship list? What's your didactics look like? Which, again, that one's can be a little weird to ask because it'll be like, oh, I did an away rotation. I literally know all their didactics, like they went over with me all week. And then you're kind of asking it again. But if you need something to ask and you can't think of anything, always, what's your didactics? What's your dermatopathology schedule for your weekly time frame that you cover that with the dermatopathologist in the program? Those are the big ones. Yeah, it's kind of. I'm sure there's a few others, but they're kind of slipping my mind right now. Oh, but I mean benefits. You can always be like, how's parking? Actually, no, never mind. That doesn't even matter because you're going to be outpatient. I'm getting confused with my TY year. I was like parking, free coffee, snacks, but that's not for derm. That won't matter.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Do you think it's smart to dual apply to like internal medicine as a backup?
When you say internal medicine, do you just mean because you're interested in it, or do you mean like internal medicine because of its relation to reapplying it to derm like years later?
No, not because of interest in internal medicine to, I guess, end up in derm somehow in the end.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, as far if you were interested in it, for sure. Like I said, I dual applied. I applied to psych, so it makes the whole process a nightmare because, yeah, I mean, you got to do it. I think I know Johnny only applied derm because he was like, if I got to grind it out for a couple years after doing research, so be it. But with me, it was like, look, I need to start making money. I love derm, but I like psych. I guess I'll do psych if I don't get derm. So I dual apply. That's going to come down to everyone's personal preference. It's going to make the applications themselves. You're going to have twice as many. You're going to have twice as many interviews. You're going to have to come up with questions for why psych and all that, and then remember those and not get them confused with why derm. But I mean, I did it. It's not that hard to keep them kind of separate. Especially if you schedule them, like the derm interviews fall much later in the cycle. Like I had one mid-February was my latest, whereas my psych interviews were mostly wrapped up by January. So dual applying, like to protect yourself if there's another field you're interested in, for sure. As far as what you're saying, like to go into IM or FM and then do the residency or maybe just do the first year and try to get out of it, I don't think it's a bad idea. But if you don't like IM, like if you despise it, but you're like, oh, I just know it has a lot of overlap with derm, I wouldn't do it because I'd be like, well, what if I don't get derm again down the road? Now I'm stuck IM. So that's like, I think it's better to find something that you're still interested in as a specialty, especially because if you're going to do IM or FM too, you're going to have to do the full 3 or 4 years of residency, because once you sign that contract, I've heard stories that you can get out of it, but it's never a good thing. Like it hurts your reputation to be like, oh, I'll do my first year of IM, but I'll secretly kind of reapply. Like that's why you'd rather apply to a prelim or a TY and do that and then reapply derm. If you match into a real categorical IM year, then you're going to kill your reputation, because it's like you're going to screw them over when you leave at the end of the first year, and now they're short of a resident. And so that's why I like the whole match system is really like strict with that. You signed a contract, like there's no getting out of it. You can't like match and then be like, oh shit, it's March 16th. I didn't match derm. I matched it to my backup. I want to redo this. It's like, no, that's why they make you do all the paperwork beforehand, because like it'll look really bad and make it tough to match into something if you like go back on that agreement. So I would say, I don't know if I answered your question fully, but I think it's better to just apply to a prelim TY and be like, okay, I'll reapply to derm during my prelim TY and I'll knock it out at the same time. So if I do match derm, now I'm ready to go into it, versus going into like a categorical IM. And plenty of people do that. I was with 2 girls in 2 different rotations, away rotations, that were in their intern year, and they were in the middle of doing the derm aways like mid-year.
Yeah, that fully answered the question. So in your case, when you did the psych, how does the ranking work? Did you rank psych below derm, or is that separate?
So it's all the same list. So yeah, every psych program was after derm. So because I didn't, you could mix and match it, but then it's like, well, then I should have just applied psych. If I'm going to play with my derm list and not have it like all just straight derm, straight psych, what's the point? So I put all my derm first, I put all my psych second. And actually, I was joking with my buddies all year, because like I did well. Like you have to for derm, right? You want to look good, you want to honor a lot and be like a high rank in your class, because it helps you. It goes in your letter. And so I did really well, and I was telling everybody I won't be surprised if I don't match, because I'm applying derm, which is notoriously hard to match. And my psych programs were all like, not to say this to pat myself on the back, but just they were all like high ranking, mostly MD psych programs that took 1 or 2 DOs every year out of their class of 20. And so I was like, all right, so now I'm putting them at the bottom of my rank list. So I'm never going to get in here, because if they're going to take a DO, if they're going to even take 1 or 2 DOs, clearly like it's going to be the people that have them spot 1 or 2. So it was a weird situation to be in. And I think it's important to like be aware of that if you do dual apply, is that, yeah, you're going to end up putting your programs after derm, because that's the whole point, right? You want to put your number 1 place first, unless you're like really 50-50. Like if you're like, I love derm as much as I love this other specialty, then sure, you can mix and match them depending on how you feel. But I don't think anyone out there exists that actually wants to do derm equal to something else.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Does anyone have questions? And if you're shy, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, I have a question.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't been checking the chat just because I'm on my phone. But let me...
No, it's okay. I'll check it. There hasn't been any. So I was wondering, along with the questions I had about the rotations, what are some, because a lot of us are second year, so they're going on general rotations, and then later on we have to think about derm rotations. So I was just wondering, a catch-all questions like, so what are some do's and don'ts during maybe some of the general rotations? You don't have to go through like specifics, but mainly like what are some do's and don'ts during like the derm rotations?
Yeah. So before I even get to that, I will say for your 3rd year, my like big tip is try to schedule, for just based off word of mouth, try to schedule the easiest rotations you can, because you want as much time to study and be like, all right, I'm going to honor my shelf exam. And if you don't, you don't. That's fine. I know people who match didn't honor anything. But again, it's one more thing to kind of put on your record and be like, look, like I honored this. That makes me stand out, right? Hopefully, fingers crossed. So by going for like the easiest places, and again, this is all word of mouth. So like I could tell you places, but you also want to ask around if you know any third or fourth years, or like how did we find out? There was a spreadsheet from the prior year. I don't know if they still do that, where like they would put together like evals of the different places on an Excel sheet, or not an Excel sheet, like a Google Drive. And I think we did that for the class below us. So I assume the class above you guys is going to do the same. So the reason that's so important is, you know, I had a friend that was doing 1 24-hour shift a week and 6 12-hour days, or 5 12-hour days with 1 day off every week for 8 weeks of surgery. Meanwhile, I chose the surgery place that was like, the first day, the 5 of us were like, all right, we're going to make a list. We'll all go into surgery, one of us, and everyone else would just stay home and chill. So we all went in 1 day a week. So it's like all of a sudden I'm on surgery where I should be working 80 hours a week. I'm studying 6 days at home. So I'm not like, your free time is like exponentially higher. So little hacks like that are big, so that you can really put time in and not be like, oh my God, I can't study for the shelf. I've been in the hospital all week. You'll actually have time and energy to do that stuff. And in case anyone's wondering, that program's Good Sam Surgery. However, they got a little bit tighter towards the end of our rotation because the group before us kind of went overboard and just started like no showing. So they might get a little stricter, but they'll still be 1,000 times better than like Jamaica or Forest Hills or anywhere like that. So yeah. So your main question about shit, I blanked out. Your main question about oh yeah, for like derm do's and don'ts. Again, don't like say you want to do cosmetic. That's all. Like you never want to deal with skin cancer. You just want to do Botox. That's not good. Always be like friendly. Like, you know, when you get in there, hi to the front desk, hi to the nurses. You know, even though everyone's in a good mood, sometimes people just like they see so many med students, they're like, I don't even want to like deal with this. This is like, there's too many people I'm meeting every week. That's fine. Still say it. It's like somebody in the office will hear you and maybe make a mental note like, oh, they're so friendly every morning. They come in a good mood. Smile. Try to get a feel for how the dermatologist or resident you're working with wants you to be that day, because some places, like they'll expect you to be a little more hands-on, or like come right up behind them on the patient and almost like be doing a skin check at the same time as them. Others will be like, you might come a little close and they'll be like, oh, that's fine. You can just hang back. And that's different from everybody. So you really need to like, you'll get a feel. Like always start off conservative. And as like you get an hour or two into the day, you'll get an idea, and try to like read their face. You know, if they look like they're like turning to hand something to somebody who's not next to them, that's a cue like, oh, they probably want me next to them to take the syringe or give them gauze or whatever. Those are all little like small things. Just, you know, be yourself, be, you know, as personable as you can be. And yeah, just, you know, sometimes it's hard, you know, if you're kind of shy, it's like, yeah, telling somebody to not be shy, you're like, what are you talking about? It doesn't work like that. But, you know, try to be as outgoing as you can. They're not going to expect you to carry a 40-minute conversation, but always just be aware. Don't play on your phone too much. You can definitely take it out when you're with the resident, but, you know, of course, like the obvious is don't take it out in the room to like look something up, unless they tell you specifically. And if it's like a really busy clinic, try not to take it out in the hallway if they're running around, because like, you know, you never want to be the reason that the derm's like, hey, we're going into a room like that. That'll look bad if they like have to call you because you're looking at your phone for something. Yeah, those are the big ones. Like I said, just be yourself and you guys will do fine.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. It says, if there is a program director email that shows up, would you email the program director? I have heard mixed things.
Is this as a third year sending an away rotation email, I'm assuming?
Yeah, can you clarify, Julia? Yes, okay.
Okay, yeah. Is it gonna hurt you? Probably not, but I wouldn't. You know, I went to places for a week and emailed the program director after the fact for like places that I got interviews at, and like they never responded. So there's so many emails flooding their inbox. So if they're not going to respond to me after an away rotation, probably not going to respond to somebody who's like reaching out for an away rotation just because they have so much going on. And again, it's really person dependent. Maybe there's a PD out there who's like an ass and he's like, I'm going to hold this against this person that they emailed me on this email of mine that was publicly posted. I don't think that's going to happen, but you're better off just, just keeping it to the program coordinator. Because at the end of the day, the director, all he's going to tell you is, oh, thanks. Like, even if he responds, the best case is to be like, oh, I'm so happy you're interested. Thanks for reaching out. Here's the program coordinator's email because I don't deal with setting up away rotations.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, did you find that your interest in dermatology helped you on your non-derm rotations? Or did you find that it was like focusing on being a well-rounded physician first, that would help you on your derm rotations, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I definitely don't think my interest in derm correlated to like any of my third year rotations. Like those things just never came up like in a hospital setting. The other way around, did my third year like rotations, those general guidelines help me? No, probably not. It's like, after I did the year of derm, I had to do 1 month at NUMIC 2 months ago for my ambulatory whatever rotation. And they were like mentioning amlodipine, which I should know that in my sleep. And I didn't know what that was. I had to Google it and I was like, oh yeah, I remember blood pressure medications. Like, you're going to forget so many of these things that there's really not going to be any overlap. Like, it never once came up that I said something non-derm related and the dermatologist was like, oh, that's great that you know about heart failure. Like, no, they don't care about that stuff. At least not where I was. So yeah, there was really no overlap, if we're being honest. Like, it helps to be well-rounded because, that just means that you studied your stuff and you probably did well in your exams and step and all that. But as far as in the clinic itself, I don't think so. I don't think it'll really play a role, except like compression bandages. You'll see that in surgery if you do vascular surgery, and you'll see that in like a lot of patients who are hospitalized with like compression bandages for stasis dermatitis, and like in those patients with heart failure, speaking of it, I guess, that you'll see in derm a lot. So like that was pretty much the only thing I could think that overlapped, where I was like, oh, part of my surgery rotation was vascular surgery. I remember about stasis dermatitis, and I was able to like say a few little things about it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. So for your program, do you have to do an intern year or do you just go straight into your residency for derm?
So I have to do a TY year. So every derm program, MD or DO, you have to do an intern year, either a TY or a prelim. A TY is just like a more chill version of a prelim. So it's also more competitive to get because you have like anesthesia, optho, people like that applying for it. But there are a couple DO programs, like one that I applied to in Michigan, where they have the programs linked. So you can just move to Michigan, wherever they're located. The hospital will be close by. You won't be part of the derm program, but you'll do your TY or prelim at that hospital. And then the next year you start derm for your second to fourth year. And now you're already located there. But the majority of places, they're separated. So I matched to TY in Orlando. So I'm moving there in June. And then next June, in like a 1 week period, I have to scramble and get over to Miami for my derm rotations before that starts. So it's helpful that they're close together, but that is one thing that can be a pain. But like, this is a problem for you guys to worry about once you're all successful in match derm, will be like the whole, if you end up, let's say you do your TY prelim in New York and your derm program's over in Michigan, it's kind of a pain that you have like 1 week in June to move over there before they start in July, but that's a future you problem.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I don't know if you answered this. I've kind of been like popping in and out of this call, but when it comes to like making the match, like your rank list, how do you rank like the derm programs? And then if you're doing like a transitional year or a prelim year, like is that like a separate rank list?
Yeah. So good question. So on your rank list, you'll have what's called a primary list. That's where you'll put the dermatology or any other field that has TYs or prelims associated, like anesthesia. Those will go in your primary list. Each time you put a derm program, a little Dropbox will open up below it, and that Dropbox will take you to a secondary list. And that secondary list is where you'll put the TYs or the prelims. So it's completely separate. So the way it works is the software, like for ERAS knows, or for NRMP, it'll know, like, basically it's telling it, if I match to this derm program, then now the secondary list comes into play, and I have my ranking for how the TY and prelims ranked me, so I know where I'm going to match there. So if you didn't match derm like I did, let's say I didn't match derm and I matched psych, none of my TYs or prelims would have mattered. I would have just gone right to psych, which doesn't have a TY or a prelim. All of them you match directly into psych from the first year. Related to that, if you want to do like the whole thing where you kind of like protect yourself, or if you don't match derm but you want to match a TY or a prelim and not a different specialty, then you'll take those TY and prelim years and you'll put them in your primary list underneath derm. So now that they're in the primary list, it's like, let's say you don't match your 10 derm places, but you match number 11, the TY or the prelim, you'll go there. But if they're not on the primary, they're only a secondary attached to a derm, they don't come into play until you match derm. So if you don't match derm, it doesn't matter. You can't match there. Like, it won't, it's the system, the whole like process won't work.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That was so helpful.
Yeah, it's confusing. I never understood it until probably a month before it started. So this is good that you guys will have like a better understanding, because I was just like, I'll just figure it out when it comes. But it's really simple once you actually like hear it, and it's like, oh, you were stressing about nothing. Like, this is a really simple process.
There's a question in the chat asking, how do you choose a TY/prelim? Should you have done an away rotation there?
Yeah, so another good one, because I had that same question when I was emailing all my derm programs. I was like, should I be emailing TY places too? No, they don't even want to see you. They don't take, like, they might take students, but just pretend they don't. Nobody does. Nobody goes to a TY or a prelim. They just take you based off your application on paper, because they know they're just renting you for a year. You're just a body to give them some labor. You're not gonna go into their second year with the rest of the IM candidates and actually learn how to do medicine. You're leaving them. Like, you're only going there just to pay your dues, I guess, and then you're out. So no, there's no away rotations. There's no like having to impress them. It's just going to be purely your application itself through ERAS.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I have one regarding what was your favorite condition that you saw, whether it be something that you researched or something that you saw during rotations.
So in my private practice one in Boston, I saw this thing called reactive perforating collagenoses. I think that sounds right. I'm 99% sure I'm saying it correctly. That was pretty cool. Like, not that, I didn't do research on it, and there's not even really a real reason besides it just looked really, really cool. The name sounded fake, and then I opened up the textbook and I was like, wow, this is a real thing. And like, I couldn't believe it. So and then the guy running the practice, 85 years old, graduated from NYU 60 years ago or whatever, and it's crazy. He's still killing it every day. But he was like, he had to pull his book out, a big like 900-page textbook, and was like, I think I saw this once 15 years ago. And he started going through it, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. So that one always stands out to me as like a cool condition.
Does anyone have other questions? We have like a little less than 9 minutes, so try to get your questions in because we want to be respectful of his time.
I have another question, sorry.
No.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but at the MatchPal meeting, John mentioned that he knew that he got into St. John's back in like February. How did that happen?
So it's funny actually, because if you were in that meeting, I was gonna say you looked familiar, the name and the face. I remember Johnny actually called me up the night that he got it. He was like, dude, I need some help here. I'm making this decision. So St. John's doesn't go through Match or through ERAS, like they just operate outside of it, which is like, that's legal. So they're allowed to tell you whenever. So when you do your away rotation with them, they'll actually interview you the last day of your rotation in person. So they don't even do an interview 6 months down the road. Like, so my interview with them was in August when I did the away. And then they'll tell you, if we like you, we'll reach out to you like mid-February, and you'll have to pull out of the match. So you won't be able to see what other programs want you, if any. You just gotta, we'll just say you want us, and you'll be like, sure, let's go there. So that, yeah, that was the big thing that Johnny was like, was thinking about. So I remember, when he called me with the whole thing, and it's completely legal. It's not like that was against the rules or anything. Again, because St. John's just doesn't operate with the match. There's another place too, another couple. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, there's a few places. I think the other ones are all MD, but I guess they have that option to not go through the match.
Makes sense. Do you by any chance know if St. Barnabas is that?
No, St. Barnabas is part of the match. Yeah. Every other major DO one, like at least, yeah, I think all of them are through the match, because when I remember looking through on ERAS, the DO programs, St. John's, it'll say like you can't check mark it because it'll say they don't go through the match, so you can't add them to your list. Like outside of so you can add them to your list to apply to, but it puts like a note like you won't go through NRMP with them. And I don't think any other DO program had that little like asterisk underneath it.
So in your case, when you did St. John's in August, were you expecting them to interview on the last day?
Not at all, no. And but I mean, so well, I knew on Wednesday they told me we'll interview you, so I had like a 2 days heads up, but I didn't know going into that rotation. I was like, oh, I don't even know answers to any of these questions. I'll figure this out when that time comes in a few months. But it went really well. It was a very chill, like laid back interview. And it's quick. I think it was like 15 minutes. And we started like, it's so laid back. I can't even tell you. It was like, we started talking about like my history in the gym and like personal training and stuff. And they started, all the residents and Dr. Rosenberg like made me join them as they did like jumping jacks and push-ups. And it was crazy, but that's how like the derm interviews are. They're very chill.
So it was everybody was interviewing you, or was it just Dr. Rosenberg?
Yeah, it was actually the residents more than her. She might have asked like 1 or 2 questions. The other 8 or 9 residents who were there that day kind of went around and they all shot like 1 or 2 off. And it was like simple stuff. It was like there was like not that I want to give stuff away, but these are all like questions you hear everywhere. It was like, what's your strengths? What are your weaknesses? If you could bring like 3 items onto a desert island, what would they be? Things like that. And of course, there's always why derm, and sometimes why medicine will come up again. So if you can remember that answer, or if you have a better answer 4 years later now, I think that came up once or twice for me.
Okay, awesome. And so the current position that you got, do you feel that the match did it right? Do you feel like your personality fits in with them the best?
Yeah, but the caveat to that answer is I would tell you yes, no matter where I matched, because I genuinely liked every place. Like only the last place on my list would I not have loved, and I still would have liked it, but it was just like it was in the middle of nowhere. So it was like, I mean, that sucks that I'm 3 hours from an airport, but besides that, everyone here is awesome, and they seem like super smart and like have great research behind them. So yeah, it's a yes no matter where I matched, but down in like the Miami Fort Lauderdale area, I think it's a great fit. I mean, that's my favorite area to go vacation with my buddies from med school and my buddies before med school, like a 3 or 4 day weekend. So it's going to be awesome. I'm not going to have the money to actually have fun down there, but we'll, I'll get a side gig doing something. I'll be a bartender. I don't know. Figure it out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I have a question, and we could wrap up with this question. Is there any last minute advice that you would give us first, second, third years as we trek on? Anything you would tell yourself if you had a time machine?
So again, Milana, you might remember I said this in the one last week. Because of my interest so early on, I didn't really have anything like that blindsided me, because I had like done so much research, especially in high school, about like derm and the whole process. But if there's really any tips, it's just, do as well as you can in school while still enjoying your free time, and do as well as you can on your on your step exams or your COMLEX, or I think you got to take both of them, right? But yeah, just do as well as you can. Try to help yourself stand out. And I said before, the biggest one would be just early research as a sign of like early exposure, and you never know who you might meet. Maybe you do research and you end up coming in touch with like a DO, like not a resident, but an actual practicing DO or MD dermatologist who really likes you. You know what? One thing I'll add, I was really bad because I didn't want to give up my free time. So I was like, I'm not going to go to any of those AAD and AOCD conferences. Definitely go to those. I should have, because every away I did, at like pretty much every other away student knew somebody, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I met this Derm at AAD. We've talked before." And I was like, "That's great. I don't know anybody." And they're going to be like, "Clearly, this kid doesn't want to do Derm because he went to nothing." Um, yeah, try to shell out the money and go to like even just one of them over your first 3 years. AAD is more worth it because that's like the big one. AOCD is kind of like getting smaller and smaller every year. But those are great because I just heard the other people that I rotated with throughout the year be like, "Oh my God, yeah, I know this guy, I know that guy. I've met him, I've talked." And so you might feel more comfortable during your aways. I always felt comfortable just because even though I won't say I'm like an extrovert, I don't really like get worried in a new situation. I'm kind of like, I'll just talk and figure it out and see like who here is cool, and we'll go from there. Um, but it certainly helps when you're showing up to a new place in a new state to be a little bit more comfortable and be like, "Oh yeah, this is cool. I'm gonna see Dr. So and so." I remember talking to him for 10 minutes about a paper he published at AAD 2 years ago. So go to those. Go to those for sure. Sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I got in and I didn't go to those. So definitely go to those.
Can I just piggyback off of what you're saying in regards to
Yeah.
this? I went to the AAD this year, and the residents that I met said going to AOCD was actually a better experience because it's more intimate. You get to know the people there more.
Okay, so if the residents said that, because I never went to any of these, then you know what? Listen to the residents. I'm not a resident yet, so put more into what they're saying. Go to them. I was gonna say that that's the one thing. AOCD, because it's getting smaller, it is more intimate. But I had still heard, maybe I was being spoken to as somebody who matched because this was a few weeks ago. I'm supposed to go and present a paper at the AOCD this year, but I had LASIK scheduled for this Thursday and I just canceled it last minute 2 days ago. So I'm not going. But when I originally told the woman that I was writing all my papers with, who's a resident in Durham, I was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be able to go and present my paper. Like, I kind of feel bad. I was looking forward to seeing everybody, especially now that I matched." She was like, "It literally doesn't matter." She was like, "AOCD is so small, like it's not important versus AAD." And maybe I think she must have just been speaking like a little bit exaggerated. So I was more so going off that. But if you heard a resident say AOCD, you're right. AOCD, you're gonna get more time with residents and more face to face, and you're going to get to talk more to everybody because like AAD is giant. I mean, it's huge. Like again, never been, but I've seen plenty of the IG videos and stories that thing is like people are coming home with luggages of like all sorts of products. So
Well, you
yeah,
have to
it's
go next year because it's in Orlando, so now you don't have an excuse.
oh listen, I'm going to be there. It's yeah, I know it's in Orlando and the AAD's in West Palm Beach. So I'll see you guys there at both of them next year for sure.
That you will, and you're gonna love LASIK. I did it and it changed my life. So when you do it, if you have any
Damn it,
questions,
Carol, I canceled it. I need you to tell me this 2 days ago. I
um,
went back on it. I scared myself. I was like, do I want to deal with dry eyes as I start residency? Let me just cancel it. Well, now
um,
I'm jealous. I'm jealous you got it and it worked out great. That's awesome.
I got it the summer before my medical school. I was like, let me fix my eyes before I have to study for hours.
Yeah, you made the right choice. I waited too long. That was my mistake.
So I'm corny, so I want to ask everyone that is able to, if we could all unmute our mics and thank Chris for coming here, and let's give him a congratulations for matching into
Oh,
Durham.
you guys don't. You don't have to do all that. Just the unmuted claps. That's plenty for me. But thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for everyone for coming, and thank you, Chris, for your time. This advice has been really invaluable to us, and I'm sure thank you for giving back to NICOM students. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. If you guys have any questions, you can shoot me an email or send me a DM, whatever. Carol, I can give you my information to give out, or I mean, I could put it in the chat. I don't know who's left here. I don't know if maybe everyone might already left by now, but whatever's easier. Yeah, if anything comes up, feel free to shoot me a message.
Okay, yeah, you could put it in the chat and maybe I could recirculate it later to the people who
Sure.
filled out these
Yeah,
answers.
whatever's easier for you guys. Yeah, I'll put my email and my IG. You guys hit me up however is easy for you, okay?
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, 1 second. I got a terrible setup here. All right. All right, guys. Great talking to you.
Thank